I always find it really weird to talk to YouTubers because I know like exactly what you look like, obviously, and I'm used to seeing you on my computer screen, and it's kind of weird that you're like talking back to me. Do you know what I mean?
Right. That's the chair I usually
Oh,
sit
that's
in.
the chair, right? Yeah. I didn't recognize that wall hanging. That's at like 100 books or whatever thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Usually
Yeah.
just like the little corner of it's in the
Ah, right.
is in
Okay.
the shot, so you can't really tell. And I usually have there's lights on the bookshelf that I usually have lit up.
Oh, you didn't put one for me?
I forgot.
Hello, welcome to the Bookcast Club, a podcast for people who like to chat books. Today it's me, Sarah, coming to you from the Netherlands, and today I'm really happy to be joined by Sarah Freshly from Freshly Read Books. Hello, Sarah.
Hello. So happy to be here.
You sound it. Would you like to tell the listeners who you are and what you do in the book world and your greatest fear and other sort of...
Just, the simple...
Just a key, just an outline if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I'm Sarah Freshly, and I run the YouTube channel Freshly Read Books, where I talk about just a lot of books. But mostly I would say that I do the Booker Awards is probably what people most know my channel for, because I read the International and the regular Booker every year and talk through all of those books. So that's definitely a substantial part of my videos. But then besides that, other books that I'm reading, a lot of it's literary fiction. Sometimes it's sci-fi thriller as well. And then I also have a Instagram with the same name, but I don't put as much effort into it. I'll work it out one of these days.
Okay. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes, even your sort of pithy Instagram. For the listeners, I would say out of the four hosts that we have of this podcast, we all have quite different reading tastes. I would say your tastes align the most closely to mine and to Jenny's. So for listeners, if you like the stuff that Jenny and I read, I think Sarah's channel you would really enjoy.
Perfect.
So can we just talk about your channel for a second? So your channel is like, what, 2 years old? Something like that? Maybe 3?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, actually, this month. Oh my gosh.
Happy
I didn't
birthday.
even realize.
I hope you get some wood or whatever the appropriate gift is. So you started your channel a couple of years ago. Was this a pandemic project, by the way?
Yeah, basically. I guess it started that way. It was something that I always kind of thought about, and I had been watching BookTube for a while before that, but it was, I think, just the pandemic was the thing that finally was like, well, why not just try?
The boredom, yeah. I also joined this podcast at the beginning of the pandemic. Okay, so you've been a reader your whole life?
Yes, yeah.
So, like, what did you do before that? Did you, like, review books or whatever? Or did you, like, what made you want to share your opinions?
I think that through watching BookTube, I started reading a lot more. And I really liked that. And then I just more and more wanted to be, like, a part of it, like, more into it and everything. And I enjoyed, like, doing the little, like, challenges that other channels would do, or, like, readathons. I would only do it as a viewer and watching those, reading my own books. And then I started I feel like I started having comments that would be like too long to be just like a comment on somebody else's video being like, this is what I thought of the book. And so that kind of just gradually turned into like, you know what, there's this book I'd really love to talk about, like, cool, more in depth, and this book and all that. I did think that I was going to want to do more like challenge based videos, which I ended up not really enjoying filming very much, and editing. Those ones, I had a hard time editing stuff like that. So I ended up just doing a lot more videos that are just like one book, one review, and that's the whole video, which I do enjoy doing. And sometimes I'll do like a couple of books in one video, which I also enjoy doing. Basically, I need to do like this switch up. Otherwise I get too bored or it feels too like monotonous, particularly the editing. I need to like have variety in my editing, otherwise that I struggle with. But yeah, I think just like missing English class oddly, and like talking through books in English class. I really enjoyed that, and it's really weird that now I basically choose to like make book reports in my free time. Like I often think about how in school I was like, oh, this is kind of annoying like to do, but and then I'd like get really into it, and now I'm like, that's what I'm choosing to do.
Yeah, I just realized I've never thought about this before, but your your review videos are quite structured, actually, aren't they? You have like sections.
Yeah, oftentimes. Yeah. Especially if I really like a book, or if it's like very clear to me, like the themes of the book, then yeah, I'll like structure them out completely. And those are always like the videos I put the most effort into. I'm like, I'm literally just writing a book report, and then I'm just going to say it out loud.
Piece of paper.
Yeah.
I like my favorite videos of the ones that you do, if you're interested, are the ones where you do the TBR challenges that Kieran puts up. I think people know Kieran, but we will link him in the show notes in case you don't. But he does these honestly stupid videos where you have to like pick a book per month, and you react to the challenge of like how you pick the book, and then you read the book and review it all in like one video, but your reactions are always really funny, and then you actually read it, so it's like instant gratification.
Yeah. I'm always like, it's kind of weird to do like the thumbnail because I like want to show a book I'm reading, but then like then in the beginning like what book I'm gonna pick. But I enjoy doing those ones a lot, and yeah, I like that it's kind of like closed loop. It's from picking to reading and what I thought.
Absolutely. Cool. So we're going to do a My Life in Books episode today. So what we do in these episodes is the guest comes on to talk about some of the books that they have read in their life that mean the most to them. So Sarah's got 6 to talk about today, or maybe 5, depending. We'll see. So looking forward to hearing about them. Would you like to tell us about your first book?
So the first one is a book series. I couldn't really choose one of them over the others, and also they kind of like blend together for me, but it's the series of Unfortunate Events, because I think that was the first books. I mean, Harry Potter as well, I guess, as a kid. I was definitely really into those. But Series of Unfortunate Events felt more, I think because it wasn't like being made into a movie or anything, like it was something that I was purely interested because of the books at the time anyway. And now they have, the Netflix series and everything. But so it seems more like, I think Harry Potter's kind of tied up in the movies as well for me, but like the Series of Unfortunate Events was like purely the books, and getting really excited for the next one to be released. And I would like read them, and then we would also like listen to the book on tape in the car when we would go on long car journeys, because the audiobook narrator did a fantastic job with them, like so good. And it was also like my first experience with where like the narrator kind of like talks to the reader, and they did like that definition thing in where they would like talk about like what a word means, and like sometimes words mean different things in different ways, but they like say it to you as the reader, and it was like so weird to me at the time because I was like, this book is talking to me.
Yeah.
Like,
I think they're so unique in that way, actually, aren't they? Because he puts in that thing, it'll say like a character does something, I'm not sure, viciously or something, and then it will say like a phrase which he means, and then they'll explain like what this more complicated word means. I loved that.
Yeah, and then it would do stuff like, oh, and the end of this story is terrible, like you shouldn't be reading this and stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, like
yeah.
You're saying this directly to me, and all I want is to read it more. So
yeah, I really enjoyed those. I really liked them as well. Did you watch the adaptations? What do you think of the adaptations?
I did. I think the only season, I think we didn't watch the last season. So, but also I don't think I ever read the last book. So part of me wants to like read that, but then part of me wants to like reread the entire thing, like to read that. And I don't know when I'm going to get that done. So, but yeah, I do like what they did with the adaptation. I feel like they did a pretty good job in the atmosphere of it. I think they really nailed. There were some parts that were, I guess, different, but that they kind of like had to be different, or maybe it was just watching as an adult. Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about the Netflix adaptation with
Yes.
Neil Patrick Harris's Count Olaf? 'Cause I remember watching the first one that came out. I think was Jim Carrey as Count Olaf.
Yeah, I think
which
so.
was,
right?
That was a really weird casting choice. I don't think I've seen the Netflix one. I'm just trying to find the name of the final book, so if I can. Oh, the last one's called The End. I don't think I've read this one either, because I think they started off quite short, and they were being released quite often.
They started getting a lot longer.
Yeah, and they started getting longer and longer with more and more time in between. So I think we're probably around this. I think we're about the same age, so probably the same thing happened to us.
Yeah, I started to a bit like lose interest. Not in that I didn't want to know what happened, but just having so much time between the books, and then I started getting interested in like more and more books. So, and eventually getting into like YA books. at that time.
Oh yeah, then John Green came on the scene. We didn't have time for Lemony Snicket anymore, am I right?
Oh, John Green. No, I read a lot of Meg Cabot.
Oh my God,
she
yeah.
did the Princess Diaries, but I haven't read the Princess Diaries, but her other books I like.
I liked those as well, but I can't remember what they were called, but I remember the covers.
I know Avalon High I really loved, and then they made it into like this really terrible movie that I watched like I think half of and was like, I can't anymore. It's too bad. Which probably if I reread the book, I'm sure I would have similar thoughts. It was kind of cheesy. But that's what made it fun.
I remember moving from Lemony Snicket to Animorphs. Did you ever read Animorphs?
Oh my gosh, I loved Animorphs.
I loved them so much.
I'd love to read like there's like 60 of those or something. I would love to read those.
Because I think they can't all be written by the same person. I don't think. I think they're like the Star Wars books, right? Where there's just like
right
Animorph books.
Yeah, it's got to be one of those things. I feel like all the like the Vampire Diaries books, I think that they had like a similar thing where like it was some other or like it was owned by the company rather than the person or the author. But yeah, it does like weird things to book series, but I'm always really fascinated in hearing about it. I haven't read that one, but I watched a very long YouTube video on it.
On the Vampire Diaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like 2 hours of a YouTube video. I watched the whole thing.
Okay.
Like I don't even watch the Vampire Diaries, but I was just very interested. There's something weird like when like a company owns a book rather than an author, and like then they bring in another person that has like the weirdest ideas like of what to do with these characters that somebody else already had a vision for, and then they just leave a bunch of storylines hanging and stuff. I love hearing about that. I think it's so weird.
Yeah, actually, I can relate to that slightly because I just became. I don't even know if I want to say this. Because Chris always calls me a nerd, which I reject. But I'm about to refer to myself as a Star Wars fan. But I will. I'll do it. I just became really interested in the Star Wars books because that's a whole weird world. I've never read a single one, but I now subscribe to a newsletter that is like dissecting which ones are good and which ones are bad. So this whole thing about like when Disney bought Star Wars and they kind of like took control of the plot, and so now there's like a Disney approved canon, but Disney haven't stopped other people from publishing books. So there's like a whole world of books that are canon, a whole world of books that are not canon. There's all of this description, and there's always like discussion in the subreddit, like there's a subreddit for the books of Star Wars, like which are canon, where they fit in to the world of the movies, how they fit into all the movies. I had no idea it was so big. It's really interesting.
Yeah. See, that stuff is so cool to me. It's so
cool.
interesting.
Do you like Star Wars?
I do. I didn't watch Star Wars until like 2 years ago. So, I mean, I'd seen the later films, or like the more recent films, and I enjoyed those and everything, but I only just like last year went back and and actually watched the original trilogy and the prequels. Mm-hmm. So I feel weird calling myself a Star Wars fan because I feel like typically those people are like they've been watching it since they were a kid or something.
Yeah,
but I enjoy the story. We watch Mandalorian. I love Mandalorian. I watched the Boba Fett one. That was all right. So, but generally, yeah, I enjoy it.
Yeah, they're really. Yeah, I've got all the like strong opinions about what order you should watch the films in and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Which I won't reveal here because it's such a room divider. Or people don't care. They're like, stop talking about Star Wars. All right, so all that to say, you really like Series of Unfortunate Events.
Yes.
Okay, they're really great. Right, what's your next book, please?
Okay, so the next one that I chose was Life of Pi by Yann Martel, which I've talked about like a bit on my channel and with Kieran as well, but just like kind of offhandedly. I've never like really talked about it on there, which I do plan on doing at some point, but I had to read it for like summer reading going into my freshman year of high school, and I like kind of liked it at the time, but it was like one of those, I don't know, assigned reading. It's always like kind of tough to really enjoy a book or really like it. But it wasn't until the discussion portion in that class that I started understanding like how much meaning could be in books. So I largely attribute this book with that, and then I went back and like reread it and everything, and it meant so much more to me like later. And I've reread it several times since then. I feel like it does a really good job of it's basically this allegory. I guess I should say what it's about. So it's about a boy whose family owns this zoo, and they are moving to Canada, and they're selling their zoo, and they have to sell the animals and like bring the animals to the different places that they've sold them to, and like I think they sold it like all mostly to a different zoo. So they're on a boat with all these animals, and the boat gets into a shipwreck, and then there's a boy on a boat with a few animals, but it ends up in the end being just him and a tiger. And so most of the book is him on this small boat with like a full tiger and the survival, I guess, of like making it through that boat trip. And I won't say how it ends because that wouldn't be good.
You've missed out
but
the
it's
most
also
important thing, I think,
right.
which is that the tiger is called Richard Parker.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Love that. Love that his name is Richard Parker. And purely because they got the form wrong. When they were writing his name down, they accidentally put the name of the zookeeper that was like there for his intake or something as they put the zookeeper's name as his name, as the tiger's name, and what they were going to name the tiger, which I can't remember, as the zookeeper's name on the form. So, but they just kept it. His name is Richard Parker. He's got like a last name and everything. None of the other zoo animals did.
It's just a security number.
I think that's hilarious. But yeah, the whole thing is like a huge allegory for religion, and the boy is like really interested in religion, and he kind of studies like 3 different ones before he ever gets on the big boat and everything. And I do think religion is a very fascinating topic in books, and I really like when books are allegories for it, because I think there's so many different ways you can take it, and it's an interesting thing. Faith in general, it's really weird, like, and philosophy and all of that. So, and once I realized that that's what it was, I guess, then I gained a lot more appreciation for it. And yeah, it's a really fun and different book. And then like at the ending, it just gives you like this weird twist where you're like, I don't even know how to take that, which is always fun.
Yeah, and a lot of the discussion that you see about this book is like, what was the end and what does it mean?
Right.
And was it real? And was any of that real? Because you can't. Exactly. It's weird, that book, because as you're reading it, you kind of accept it. This was my experience anyway. I just kind of accepted it at face value. And then about three quarters of the way through, you stop and you're like, what is happening?
Yeah. It gets like, so weird that you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. And then you sort of take a step back and think about what you're actually reading. And then I remember thinking, oh, hang on, but what is this?
Right. Because it's so realistic. I mean, with the, like, of course, he's on a boat with a tiger, which is crazy. But it's told in a very realistic way. Like,
yeah.
And then it starts, like, things started getting really weird. And you're like, is it just from like dehydration and like, know, because you're hearing this story through this boy that's like not eating a ton, and like, is it this and that, and yeah, and then the ending happens and you're like, wait, sorry, what? So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, there's something about the narration. I think the narrator is so factual or something. He just kind of tells you matter-of-factly what's happening, and I just believed him completely until literally the last 50 pages, where I was like, just hang on, let's just take 5.
Yeah, you're gonna have to slow down.
Yeah. Let's go a tiger. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and yeah, it is really thought-provoking. I probably didn't get as many of the allegories as you did, because I know it's a very layered book, but I really enjoyed it, and I find religion interesting as well. So,
yeah, and the movie was pretty good.
I haven't seen the movie.
For it being an adaptation of a book, I feel like nobody's ever going to be happy. But I think they did a pretty decent job with it. And it was just beautiful to see, because obviously you can imagine it, but I don't know. The sea is so much bigger when you see it, I guess.
When you see it. Right, next book.
And then I had to pick one book by my favorite author, who's Kurt Vonnegut. And so I chose Slaughterhouse-Five because, I don't know, you kind of have to. I usually pick this book if I have to pick like a favorite book, although I kind of rebel against favorite books. But I read this one after when I finished high school. I think it was like the summer after high school. And basically, if you don't know about Slaughterhouse-Five, it's about this guy, Billy Pilgrim, who he is in the war. He's in the bombing of Dresden, which Kurt Vonnegut himself was in. And he stayed in he was kept and held as prisoner of war in a slaughterhouse, in an old slaughterhouse that had a 5 hanging above the door, which is where the name comes from. And but not only that, he also comes unstuck in time, which is insane. So basically the story's told like super out of order, but Billy's kind of jumping in and out. So he'll be like in the war, and then he'll be in a different place in his life. And also there's aliens called the Tralfamadorians. And so sometimes he'll be with them, and that's kind of how he becomes unstuck in time. And they see time basically as a lot of moments all at once, as opposed to seeing things like in order. So Billy's kind of getting like a human version of how they see time. And it's so weird and good. I love this book so much, and I'll read it like I'm sure a million more times. And it's so short for it being what it is. And I think it's a very interesting way, because they really like publishers wanted Kurt Vonnegut to tell his story, because being in the war, being a prisoner of war, is obviously a very unique experience. So for somebody who then becomes an author to have gone through that, they really wanted him to tell that story. And I just like that he told it in a very unique way. And also it breaks the fourth wall and stuff, which I'm a huge sucker for in books. I love it. So I think that Series of Unfortunate Events got that started. And then if I see it in other books, it's just like an automatic little win for me.
Interesting. I didn't realize that he was actually in. I thought, so he was just in Dresden at the time, but he was born in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
So shout out to that fair city. But yeah,
interesting. Go Indianapolis, and we've also mentioned John Green, who is also from Indianapolis, I believe.
Know. What a great city. I've actually never read any Kurt Vonnegut, much to my shame. Well, I don't feel that much shame about it, but it's a fact. What do you think about is that what you would recommend as a starting point for his stuff?
I think so. I started with Slapstick, which for people that know Kurt Vonnegut's writing, is probably like one of the worst places you can start. But I figured, like, I don't know, it just looked like an interesting book. I just like picked it up at a Barnes and Noble, and I'd heard, of course, the name Kurt Vonnegut. And I think I picked up Slaughterhouse-Five as well. I don't know why I read Slapstick first. And it's also very weird, but it's considered to be one of his worst books. Okay. But I really liked it. So I was like, well, if I like one of his worst books, then it's probably a good sign. But yeah, I think I would recommend starting with Slaughterhouse-Five. People would probably also recommend Cat's Cradle, which is good as well. My other favorite by him would be Breakfast of Champions, but I would not recommend reading that one first, because it's kind of this like collection of a bunch of thoughts that he has and drawings that because he draws a lot in his books. There's a lot of like little drawings and things. Yeah, Breakfast of Champions ended up being this like weird amalgamation of a lot of like different storylines and stuff that he wasn't sure how else he was going to be able to write or fit into other stories, because they weren't like as fully formed. And if you like short stories, Welcome to the Monkey House is one of my favorite short story collections.
I do like short stories. Okay, interesting. Thanks for that. Yeah, one day. It's one of those authors. You know, there's those authors where you're like, must get around to that.
Well, James Franco recently did, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, did an audiobook version of Slaughterhouse-Five, and he did a great job of it. Listen to it again, even though I've already read it. Oh, and there's a graphic novel version if you want to go for that, which is actually really fantastic.
Not for me, but
okay.
Take note, listeners.
Anyone out there?
Yeah. It's a no from me, but a yes from others, I'm sure.
And, you know, he's not like the perfect person or anything, but I feel like for the time period, he was very progressive, very, very cool, like thoughts and everything about humans, Americans, the world, and basically just be nice to each other. That was his main thing.
This is where we take a little break to tell you about all the different ways you can support the podcast, some of which are totally free. A really effective and super easy way of showing your support is by rating and reviewing us on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. There is a link in the show notes that will take you straight to the Apple Podcast page where you can write a review. And if you listen on Spotify, you can now very easily give us a star rating. You can also share our posts on social media. We are at Bookcast Club on both Instagram and Twitter. You can sign up to our free monthly newsletter where we share even more book recommendations and the latest podcast news. But the best way for us to find new listeners is by you telling your book-loving friends and family about us. If you want to support the podcast financially, we do have a Patreon account. You can sign up for as little as £2 a month. We offer early access to the podcast, monthly bonus episodes, and our top tier will get you all of the above and personalized book recommendations. We get you to fill in a survey, and then we tailor our book recommendations to your preferences. We will also send you books in the post. The link will be in our show notes. But however you choose to support, we, as always, want to say a huge thank you. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners.
So this is kind of a weird pick because I actually don't like this book. But it was really big for me. So it's The Circle by Dave Eggers. And like, no hate on Dave Eggers because I have since read other books by him and I do actually really like his writing. But this one in particular, I think is pretty not great, pretty unremarkable. So basically it's they made a movie about it too. Emma Watson's in it. And basically it's kind of like 1984, but like modern times, I guess, where a very Google-esque company is the kind of centerpiece, and so the main character like goes and works for this company, but like you see this like evolution of more and more things being recorded until basically anywhere you are in the world you're being like picked up by a camera and being seen, and like anybody can look at those basically at any time. And the point is to like see it as kind of this, like see both sides of it. Like I think there's like this conversation about how this guy's son has it can't travel for health reasons, and so there's a lot of places in the world that he can't see, but he can pull up a video right away of like, you know, the south of France or something. So you're supposed to be able to see both sides of it. But honestly, I feel like that was the best argument that they had for putting cameras all over the world, that anybody could just have access to at any time. And like people would start wearing cameras. It was a whole thing. Yeah, the reason why I picked it is because I've been in a in-person like book club for over 5 years now. And that I started through Meetup, the like website Meetup. And I was terrified to do it, but I just kind of decided like, oh, if it goes terribly, like we, you know, nothing lost through it, like that's fine. But our first book was The Circle, which I picked. So sorry, book club. But it was so much fun to like come together and talk about a book that almost none of us liked. And I think that it oddly like really solidified that book club. I don't know if it would have lasted as long as it has without having like, I don't know, like just a book to just make fun of and like point out all the flaws or all the things we wish they had done differently. It's like, I realize that having a book club it's good if you really like a book and you want to talk to somebody about how much you like a book, but it's even better when you put so much time into reading a book that you ended up really not liking. And then it almost feels like a waste that you did that. But then if you get to talk to somebody else about it and like kind of commiserate on it, it feels so much better. And I swear it's like the best way to make friends is talking about a book that you don't like with them.
Yeah, that's funny.
So
there's a book in my book club, I think it's The Book of Dave by Will Self, I believe, which was similarly chosen a few years ago and everyone absolutely hated it. But the lore around this book is so strong, such that I think almost no one who was around during that book club is still in the book club, including me. This was before I joined the book club, but everyone knows about this book, and that its sort of reputation just goes beyond.
That's the same way. Yeah. I feel like I'm single-handedly or the book club single-handedly like pulling down Dave Eggers' reputation, which again, he's a really great author and he's written other really good books and short stories. But yeah, it's the same with us. The people that have joined after that book, like they know of that book, and there's even been some that have been like, I kind of want to read it just so that I know what you guys are talking about, like so that I understand.
It's a dreadful book though. Just for the record, I think it's really bad. I didn't like it at all.
You have read it? Yeah, I would say just save your time, read 1984.
It's so shallow and anyway.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about it.
It does such a bad attempt of like doing something that's already been done, which I mean, fair game. I'm totally fine with people like rewriting old stories or putting new twists on things and whatever, but like just know that you're really gonna have to do it well.
Yeah, I just thought it was so like I wouldn't even normally talk about it on the pod because it's so hard for me to be positive about it in any way, shape, or form. Normally I try to be like, oh, if you liked this, maybe you would like it. But this one, I thought it was so like pseudo-intellectual philosophizing about, oh, social media is so bad. Real deep, bro.
Great take.
Yeah,
never heard that one
hot
before.
take, bro. Well, I think we should be really careful about technology, actually.
Yeah, it took me years. I thought I just like hated Dave Eggers as an author, and then my partner's sister was like, it was like, you don't like Dave Eggers? And I was like, you do? She was like,
exactly.
Here, read these. She had not read The Circle, so she didn't know. And
No, I don't know.
thank God she did, because now I have a better appreciation for him.
You do? What did you read? Can you remember?
So I think, oh gosh, it's very weird titles that he does, so they're very hard to remember. But one of them I read was actually nominated, I think, for a Booker Prize, which tells you how different actually I could see The Circle being nominated for a Booker Prize, because I'm comparing it in my mind to another book that was on the Booker Prize last year.
That group of old white men being like, oh, technology is so bad.
Right. Oh, The Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius is... so that was the other novel of him that I read, which was really good. So completely different than The Circle, like writing style and everything. I can't... My mind can't understand how it's written by the same person. Then there was a short story collection, How We Are Hungry, that I really liked by him as well. So those two I would highly recommend.
Very good of you to keep reading, in my opinion, and keep trying an author. I wouldn't normally do that.
Yeah, I know, me neither, except only because I got like the personal recommendation for it. I was like, all right, I guess I could try.
Yeah, no one's ever tried to convince me to read any more Dave Eggers, so he's out of my life.
And that's fine too. I hope that he like turns back around, because obviously The Circle was written after those other ones, so I don't know what he's doing.
I feel like he's in a tiny house somewhere. Anyway. I don't know why I just hated that book so. I think I was spewing it. Anyway.
Oh yeah, I really wanted to like it too, because like I had picked it for the book club, and I just wanted it to do. It was the first book club book. Like I wanted so badly to like it, and even like through the beginning of it, I was like convincing myself that I did actually like it. I like recommended it to Curtis to read, which is terrible. We were like really early on in our relationship. And then I finished it and I was like, oh, just kidding. Don't read this. Like, don't do it. And he read it anyways. And he didn't like trust my suggestions for like 4 years after that. I only just got him reading books that I suggested again. And so the fifth book this is the weird one.
I thought that was The Circle, damn.
And it's The Circle again. Just picked it twice. So it's the D&D Player's Handbook. Oh my god. It's such a weird one to pick, I know. But I really got into playing Dungeons and Dragons online with friends. So like I don't have a ton to say about like the book itself. It's basically just all the different like things that you can play and the mechanics of the game, things like that. But I will say until the end of time that everybody should try playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's so much fun. And I feel like it's got a really weird stigma around it. So
yeah.
I want to fight that.
What's it called? The Dungeons and Dragons?
Player's Handbook.
Is this the official one? Or
This
something?
is the current edition. So it's the 5th edition is the current like edition of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
so that's what this
Dungeons, and I can't even say it, so I'm definitely not playing it. D&D does have a very weird... I for a long time thought it was like sexual.
I did not understand it.
I really thought it was like a role-playing thing for years.
I mean, it is technically a role-playing
Yeah, but like a role-playing
but
thing.
yeah, I get what you're
not that
saying.
kind of role-playing thing. So I was like, oh, it takes all sorts for years, and I only learned recently that it's not. It's just a game.
Yeah. It's fun and silly, but it's Also, it was such a great, I play virtually. It was such a great way to keep up with my friends through COVID and even still, because we live kind of all over. But it creates the best inside jokes, like the best, like it's just a fun thing to go through together, and especially if people like reading already, and I assume if they like fantasy. I'm not even a big fan of fantasy, but I'll play this. It's super fun. I got into it because of a podcast, actually. My brother and me is a podcast that I love, but they have another one where it's called The Adventure Zone, and it's just a D&D campaigns basically. And that was when I finally really realized what D&D was and how like silly it can be, because I don't know, it seems really serious and like something that only people in like their mom's basements do or something.
Yeah.
And but then really it's just like you playing a game with your friends where like if you don't care about certain things, like you don't have to do certain things, like you don't have to worry about a lot of stuff, and you can play in a much more silly fashion, if that makes sense.
But you play with the same people all the time, right? That's the idea.
Yeah. So the campaign that it's been going on for like 3 years. But we're going to do like one shots here and there, which is basically like sit down, just do one session. And then for those, like we might bring in different people or something. Because actually, since we started playing, other people in our friend group have now been like, oh, I wouldn't mind trying it out. So it is interesting. I think just like knowing people that play it, it brings an openness more to it, I guess. It's kind of weird. I know more people, and also once I started playing and talking about it to other people, then I started learning about more people that I knew that actually played it, but just like never talked about it.
Yeah.
So that's been interesting.
All right, so that's your weird extra book. What's your last one?
What's my actual last book?
Yeah, what's your actual last one, if you don't mind?
So I had to pick Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. Because I couldn't not. This I feel like is like synonymous with like my channel, my friendship with Kieran from Katie Books. Like it was the first book that I ever did like the style of review that I'll now do, like the very structured style of review videos. So like that was, I feel like so much came out of that book for me that so synopsis, the book is about basically a mother-daughter relationship where the mother is aging and she's got like memory problems. I believe they do say Alzheimer's in it, but it's kind of just more briefly mentioned. But it's a given basically that's what it is. So she's having a harder and harder time taking care of herself. So it's kind of like that shift in dynamic where the daughter kind of starts becoming more of the mother figure. It's a lot more about like the struggle of because the daughter doesn't particularly, like their relationship isn't particularly close. And so you learn more about like their relationship and growing up and what the daughter kind of resents, I guess, the mother for and stuff. So it's a dive into their relationship, but also there's just so many like metaphors, I guess, or like moments that are just like seem like weird and out of place, but really add a lot to the story. And I think just Avni Doshi as an author did a fantastic job. She took like 7 years writing this book, and it's not like a hugely long book or anything. But I think she did such a good job of like making it all of what needed to be in the book and not having like any extra. Nothing feels like it shouldn't have been included or anything. And I think that's kind of rare to find in books, which is nice. But also while I was reading the book, so this was for the 2020 Booker Prize, it was the first book that Kieran and I read once the list was announced. And before that, like Kieran and I talked a bit, and he basically just kind of like convinced me to read Booker that year. And I was like super against it. I was like, I don't want to like commit to this whole like book award and everything. I'd literally like never heard of the award before, which is funny because Life of Pi has won it, but I had no idea. So I was like, what am I going to do? Read this award I'd never heard of? And he's like, no, you should just do it. It'd be kind of cool, like American perspective. And I was like, all right, whatever, fine, I'll do it. And so the first one we read was Burnt Sugar, and we just like voice messaged each other like back and forth like constantly for a few days while we were both reading it and just gushing about like these moments in the book. And it was just so much fun, like moments that he noticed that I didn't, and then vice versa. And then, yeah, I ended up doing like a video style that I do all the time now, which I think is just kind of cool. And it's a great book. I'm sure if you watch my or Kieran's channel, then
You've heard of it, yeah.
both of us have talked about it a lot.
Kieran does have, speaking of how you said that you weren't going to read Booker and then you did, he does have incredible powers of persuasion. Thank God
He
he's not some
does.
kind of political extremist. He's just here to talk about Booker. Thank
Yeah,
God, that's
honestly,
all he wants.
he's using his powers for good.
Yeah, he really does. I've got something to tell you. I didn't like this book at all.
Yeah, that happens.
The long and the short, if you're interested, it was too cold for me.
Too cold. You know, I could see that. I could definitely see that.
I just needed to, I felt too, I'm a very like character driven, living inside someone's head person.
Mm-hmm.
And for me in this book, it just wasn't there. Which is not like, it's just, that's not the intention of the book, and that's not how she wrote it.
Right.
It's like intentionally detached, and for me that never, ever works.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I think that was probably a benefit. Mother-daughter books I don't typically gravitate towards or want to read. I don't know why. Like, great relationship with my mom.
Let's move on from that. Yeah, let's not dive into that. We'll just take it at face value.
But for whatever reason, I mean, or any books really that is just like, this is about a family dynamic, and like when they're pitched that way to me, they never sound very interesting to me. And so going into this book, I was a little bit worried about that, and like not that I just wouldn't like it because of that. But I think that oddly, like having that cold and detached, I hadn't read anything like that before. Mm-hmm. So I think that ended up being a help to me in reading it. But yeah, I definitely understand why some people might not like that. I could totally see it. I don't think everybody, I mean, I know everybody won't like this book 'cause a lot of people don't. But I think that it oddly does have maybe like a love-hate. I don't know a lot of people that are like super lukewarm. No. I don't know if you feel.
It's got
lukewarm.
It's quite a unique book, I think. So I agree. People either like it or don't like it.
Mm-hmm. It's fun like that.
Yeah, that is
makes for good conversation.
What did you? I can't even remember what one book of that year, 2020.
That one was Shaggy Bane.
Oh, I forgot about that. Shaggy Bane.
Yeah.
Really? And then last year, who won it last year?
The Promise.
The Promise. Thank you. You forget so quickly, don't you? Or you're like, wait, was that last year or the year before? Shaggy Bane.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of hard.
I just started Young Mungo, actually. Have you read Young Mungo?
I haven't. I'd like to, though. I wasn't a huge fan of Shaggy Bane. I didn't dislike it either. That one I was very lukewarm about.
No, neither was I really, but I'm looking. But yeah, I tried the audiobook of Young Mungo and I didn't super like it, so I'm gonna get the actual one out from my library and give it a go. But yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Shaggy Bane either, but I know that we are very much in the minority there, my friend. People love it. Yeah,
it's funny, the video I did for that one, I think I sounded very positive because I was seeking out the like themes that I did like, and I did it in that same way, because at the time I was doing all my reviews then in that way, even if I didn't particularly like the book, which now I don't usually do because it's a lot of work to put into a book that you don't really like. But I waited till the end of the video to be like, I didn't really like it, like it was just okay. But I have a lot of comments on that video that are like, oh, I really loved it too, and I'm like, what? Did you watch till the end of the video?
They comment too early.
It's funny.
Yeah, people love that book. I really
I feel like that video would not have done as well on my channel if more people watched to the end.
Yeah, it's worth it for the clicks. That's a funny. That Shaggy Bane is a funny book because I really struggle to see why people would like it so much, to be honest.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like anything special to me, I guess.
Like Burnt Sugar, not at all. I completely see why someone would like it.
Mm-hmm.
I can completely see with that book that the fact that I didn't like it is quite personal to me as a reader. Shaggy Bane is. I really struggle to see. I mean, obviously, there's something wrong with this because it won.
I know,
and people love it. But I just don't get it.
I did not expect it to win.
We're still talking about this. It's been 2 years. We're still talking about Shaggy Bane not winning.
We're still upset about it.
Yeah.
My first Booker. Ugh.
Yeah, that was weird. Anyway, that's the Booker though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, you read the Booker long list every year, right?
Yes, yeah.
And you're reading again this year. And you read the international one this year as well.
I was
Me too.
Technically 2 books short.
Yeah.
I regret to say. I still have them. I'll read
Which
them.
ones did you not read?
Phenotypes and Paradise.
Don't read phenotypes.
That's what I hear.
No, it's not good.
So
It doesn't make any sense.
yeah, I'm not very motivated to read it for sure.
All right. I think that's about it. Anything else that you'd like to say?
I don't think so.
Your face is so serious.
I'm trying to think if I have anything to say.
What do I do with this platform?
I'm like, yeah, what do I do at this time? No, I don't have anything to say.
You don't have anything. Okay, great. Well, that was that. So I'm going to link everything that we talked about in the show notes below, and I'll put your link to like Burnt Sugar and a couple of other like specific videos that I think people would like. I mean, all your videos are good, but I'll give people a bit of a starting point.
Perfect.
So they can get into the Sarah Freshly back catalogue. Thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
Links and everything to Sarah will be in the show notes. If you would like to leave us some feedback, or if you have questions or literally whatever, send us an email at thebookcastclub@outlook.com. We are on Twitter and Instagram at bookcastclub, on both of those. You can leave us a voice message if you would like to do that. The link for that will be in our show notes. And we also have a newsletter where we release a sort of monthly or bi-monthly or something like that. An newsletter where we do podcast recommendations and updates on our podcast, book reviews, etc. And lastly, if you really enjoyed the pod and would like to support us further, we also have a Patreon account. With the Patreon, you can get monthly bonus episodes, early access to the pod, and on our highest tier, we also send you personalised book recommendations and books in the post. Most of all, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Sarah Freshly from Freshly Read Books. It was a pleasure.
It was.
And see you guys in a few weeks.